Hello, 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 and welcome back to That Quirky Bird Girl. I'm your host, Steph, and I'm here for another episode. I am so grateful to come on and talk about the birds with you all and share my story. Today, we're going to be getting a little bit more into my life and how it has been directly impacted by the birds, about how we can take those lessons and transfer them over into things like our travel and our day-to-day life. Let's get started with our chapters. And our third topic is for those of you that might not necessarily be neurodiverse. Chirp chasing is for everyone. And I will never limit you in what you can or cannot do. I want to point out some of the cross benefits of learning to love the birds. So I will point out how, in my experience, being neurodiverse really helped me understand and relate to the birds in a way that I didn't feel like I would have been able to do before. But that doesn't necessarily mean, if you're not someone who's neurodivergent, that you can't also relate to the birds in similar ways. At the end of the day, we are all human and we have similar yet different experiences that can help us relate to one another. And I understand that with terms or labels, often it can make people feel more separate from one another or more broken out. And that's not my intention here. So I want to call out the areas where this is really beneficial to go out and spend time with the birds, regardless of what your neurotype is. Our chapter number 4 is going to be all about the meditative, structured, and sensory benefits of spending time with the birds. And y'all, when I got a pen in my hand, I could not stop writing about this section. I kept going and going and going. There is so much that we can say about the birds and how they help us in these 3 ways. So that might be its own episode in itself, but I want to let you know what's to come. Our 5th chapter is traveling through the birds. And hear me out, because this is a little bit of an interesting one. There are ways that we can take the bird mindset or these sensory, meditative, structured benefits into our travel. Now, if you're someone who has never traveled, you're a little bit nervous about it, or maybe even you're someone who has traveled so much and has lost some of the appreciation that you could have for the birds, don't you dare worry, because I will be going over how to get that appreciation back and how to grow it further. And that is all for our chapters. Our chapter number 3 is chirp chasing, and yes, y'all, it is for everyone. So I just broke down how it is a great hobby for those of us that are neurodivergent, but that doesn't necessarily mean that if you are neurotypical that this is not a hobby for you. If you have people in your life that are neurodiverse, this is a great episode for you to be watching, but it's also good for you too. You have so many skills that I'm sure haven't necessarily been leaned into. For example, if you're someone who is very detail oriented and you really like your sense of sound, for example, and you haven't been able to lean into that in your day-to-day, but maybe you spend some time outside and you're just hearing the birds, that's a great opportunity for you to lean into one of your skills that you haven't been able to practice. So I encourage you to do that. Regardless of your age, I think birds are a great outlet for people who are older, for people who are as young as 4, maybe even younger. You know, if I didn't have the experience that I had with birds when I was so young, I don't know that I would be able to speak English in the way that I speak today. I don't know that I would have ever been taken out of my echolalia-based state into a state where now I am actually hyperverbal and I over-communicate oftentimes, because that was just what I had to do. Everything in my head, it just had to kind of plop out. And so birds can unlock that for you. They can unlock that for your grandchild, for your niece, for your nephew. Helps you build and learn and grow relationships in a way that's so holistic. Birds and those experiences with birds are going to be carried through for the rest of your life. And I have followers who have grandparents that have taken them out to experience nature and to express a love for the nature, much like my great grandpa did, who was one of the most influential figures in my life for the way that I see nature. But I encourage you to also offer that to the people in your life, because we all need it. We need community, and we need people who show us that the world is a beautiful, beautiful place, and that the birds alongside us get to live in it. It's not just that we show up every single day and the beauty that is outside just exists. It's that we show up and we get another opportunity to experience the world in its truest, most raw form as the birds come and go to us. So take someone that you love out to see the birds and let me know how it goes. In addition to that, there are no rules outside of ethics for when you are hanging out with the birds. And I will name those 3 primary, and maybe I'll dive deeper in a future bird episode, but these are the 3 that you're going to want to keep in mind if you're getting started. The first one is keeping your distance. This is probably one of the most important ones that I would talk about, but you're going to want to give at least 6 to 10 feet of distance from a bird. If you are someone who just accidentally stumbled upon a bird, make sure you are not looking them in the eyes. Again, as with any other animal, it's probably a good idea to not look them in the eyes. That can be incredibly intimidating. So try to keep your eyes away from where their sight is, or their sight line of sight. There we go. Try to keep your eyes away from their line of sight. And then in addition to that, you can kind of slowly back up to give them a little bit more space if that is what they're needing. That is the first point. The second point that you're going to want to do is no feeding. Please, please, please do not feed the birds. Do not feed the geese. Oftentimes I see people with a bag of like old bread. That's just it's not good for the birds' digestive systems. It's not good for the water that they will eventually go swim in. So as much as you can, do not feed the birds. If you are interested in them and feeding them, what you can do is grow some native plants in your area or help a local garden by planting some of those native plants that will ultimately help them flourish and also bring more birds to the area naturally and with a more reliable source than what it would be than just like a stranger handing out food, for example. And the third one is to not play bird calls or bird recordings. So I live in New York City, and I give bird tours in Central Park. If you're interested in joining them, my link is on my link tree to go ahead and book a tour with me. But there is an issue in Central Park where oftentimes people will play bird calls or bird recordings to draw out other birds. This is a problem for many, many reasons, but one of them, and the one that I'll give in this episode, is for drawing birds out into an area. There are lots of birds of prey in Central Park, a lot. If you were to play, for example, a bird call for a blue-throated black warbler and it leaves its area because it thinks that there is a mate that they can try to acquire, and then there is a bird of prey that is just chilling from the rooftops or treetops and they dive down and get that bird, that's not something that would naturally happen, and it didn't need to happen. So I just encourage you I ask that you don't use bird calls or bird recordings, even though it's enticing to bring out more birds and to hopefully see more of them. It's ultimately not worth it. Chapter number 4. All right, y'all. So this is chapter number 4, and this is the one that I was most excited for, and it is all about the meditative, sensory, and structural background that our birds can provide in our day-to-day. If you are someone who has never practiced meditation, birds are a great way to get started, especially if you don't particularly like the practice of meditation. I know a lot of people don't, just because it is hard to sit still. For those of us that are ADHDers or neurodiverse, it can be really hard to just sit still and sit with yourself. So going outside with the birds while still being stimulated by everything that you're seeing in your environment and in your surroundings will be really impactful as you get started with spending time with the birds, and then also just showing up as your most grounded, meditative self. And this is the practice of meditation without even realizing it. So you are looking around, and oftentimes I would find myself at the beginning like, oh, I'm breathing a little bit deeper than I usually would, and my breathing isn't as shallow, and I feel much more calm. And every time I leave from going outside with the birds, going chirp chasing, I feel so much better, and I feel like I'm able to work on things in a more grounded way, and my anxiety doesn't pop up as much. These are all things that I have literally said after going to see the birds. And this was before I was really deep into yoga. I truly leaned on birds as a way to help ground myself and feel more comfortable in different environments. And I would even go so far as bringing one of these beautiful plushes with me, because they actually made me feel so much better and so much more grounded if I could take the experience and remind myself of what it was like to be outside with the birds with me literally all the time in my pocket. The next thing is green is literally healing. The color green literally, I don't know what it is. And, maybe there is some scientist that can explain, but the color green literally helps me in particular feel so much more safe, more comfortable, more confident, more alive than I have ever felt in my whole entire life. And spring is such a beautiful time to be able to get outside and just see the birds, while also reminding yourself that you too can grow alongside all of the beautiful, luscious trees and green that you see. I alluded to the next one earlier, but that deep breathing, that grounding, that sense of joy and random excitement that you get when you see a bird out of literally what seems like nowhere sometimes. It can be all brown trees and just you're surrounded by bright brown, and then you see something that's like bright red, say it's a northern cardinal, and you're just like stunned. That moment of joy that you get to experience is so meditative, and also it helps you learn a little bit about the quote unquote real world that I will get into in just one second. Next, being outside with the birds is completely and totally unpredictable. It is not something that you can set out and say like, okay, this is what I'm going to experience. Oh, no. You can go on eBird and you can look at all of the different birds that were sighted in that specific park, but that doesn't mean that those are the birds that you're going to see. That gives you an idea of some birds that you could see, but it could be 10 different birds. You could see 10 less, you could see 10 more, you could see, the experience completely varies. And not only does it mean that it varies, but it also means that it is literally your own. You get to choose what it looks like. You get to choose what path you go down. You get to choose what bird you listen to. Say you're hearing a northern cardinal in the back and American robin in the front. You get to decide, do you want to run to the back? Do you want to run to the front? What is it that you want to do? And it empowers you in this way that is so beautiful, because it is entirely up to you. It's your call. And that in itself is healing too, because it gives you the opportunity to learn how to fully trust yourself, trust your choices, trust your ability to make choices, and get comfortable with the uncomfortable. It can be so uncomfortable to not know or to not totally be sure on which direction that you want to head in. Do you want to go back? Do you want to go forward? What do you want to do? It's totally up to you. But it is unpredictable and it is completely changeable for your own experience. And I encourage you to lean into that uncomfortability, because once you start doing it with the birds, it's almost like they provide this safety net that you get to lean into. And it's so beautiful that you get to also take this quality of having the safety net of birds and relay it onto other areas of your life. So it's not just with the birds where you're accepting this unpredictability and this lack of control that you have in changing your environment. Eventually, those lessons, those thought processes convert over into your day-to-day life, where you're accepting the unpredictability and finding where it is that you can make those small decisions about your life, whether it be turning around and going in one direction or going in the other. You decide. And that is so beautiful. And I encourage you to lean into trusting yourself in that way, because it is much easier than it feels when you do it alongside the birds, as opposed to doing it alone. And you don't have to do anything alone. You've got my community. If you have not yet joined my Patreon, we are building it up over there. So go ahead and take a look. I have the link on this show, and you can click into the bio and go ahead and follow. I also post some extras over there, so be sure to check it out. I can't wait to see you there. Then we have the opportunity to absorb multiple different senses at a time. So we know there are 5 senses. I'll run down them and how birds hit each one of them, excluding one, but we'll get into the fun that you can create about that one. The first one is touch. So oftentimes when I'm walking and I'm outside with the birds, I will lean over and I will touch a tree, feeling the bark of different types of trees. If there is one tree and another tree right next to each other, you feel like the rough, rigid bark of one tree and then the smooth, soft, easy bark of another that you can run your fingers along. That is touch. There are also railings. So oftentimes you will have like a wood or some sort of like steel that you can touch. Sometimes it'll be cold, warm. You get to feel a different temperature based on where you are at. That can make it very engaging. Next, we have sound, which is specifically their bird calls. So getting familiar with bird calls, bird sounds, bird song gives you the opportunity to, again, lean into that detail-orientedness and also just understand yourself a little bit better and what it is that you are identifying. Next, we have sight. So this, of course, means seeing the birds, being able to identify their different plumage colors. Are they a male? Are they a female bird? Are they an immature bird? All of these things lead into that same detail-oriented, but also allow you to be a little bit more creative and get excited about the different types of birds that you're seeing. I always get so excited when I see an American goldfinch family of usually there'll be 4 to 5 individuals. And I'm like, oh, there's the male, there's the female, there's the 3 young. And it's so empowering and exciting. And you just get this like intense sensation and overwhelming feeling of like not only did I do it, but I did it with them. And it feels so good. Next, we have smell. So if you're going to see the birds after it's rained, maybe you smell the soil, maybe you're smelling some freshly mowed over grass, maybe you're smelling oak trees. There could be a variety of different smells that you're noticing depending on where you are at. But I encourage you to just take note of those 4 things. And the last one is taste. And this is all dependent on your own personal experience. I love a good snack. And if you are having a good time while outside, I encourage you to bring a nice little snack. Always take the trash back with you, but it's going to be a great chance for you to just experience the birds and fully experience all 5 senses while you are outside with them. The next thing in terms of offering a structural environment alongside the birds is leaning more into some of that trust that I talked about a few seconds ago. So now you're at a point where you have this trust in your ability to identify birds, you have trust in your ability to have this meditative, grounding experience with them. So what do you do with that? Well, what you'll do is you will trust that the birds are going to come to you. Now, what this means is that you put full faith in the process of, if you go out to see birds, that whatever birds you see are the birds that you are meant to see for that day. So not hoping that you would see a different type of bird, not wishing that things were different. And there are all of these what if scenarios that you could truly lean into and really obsess over. And that can be really hard for someone who has a lot of time to sit and think about their experiences with the birds. So I encourage you to go into it knowing that you're just going to trust the process, trust that you'll see whatever birds that you see, and whichever ones that come to you are the ones that were meant to come to you, come for you. And you don't need to spend so much time wishing or desiring to see a different bird, because when it does come, because it will eventually come, it will be exactly what you looked for. And maybe even better, because you didn't sit and spend time wishing and longing for something different or longing to see this bird that you eventually all along were going to see. And if you only knew and trusted that that was a bird that you were going to be able to see, then the experience, the joy, those moments where you would get back from that experience of seeing the birds would have been so much better, because you would have been able to appreciate the fact that you saw 2 red-tailed hawks, for example. I mean, how cool are those birds? And missing out on those experiences because you're longing for a different one is going to be such a miss. And it also applies to other areas in your life. You know, there are so many times where I've sat with the what ifs, and you could sit and you could think and ponder, but it doesn't change anything. You saw what you saw, you experienced what you experienced. You have to let it go to move on, to have different experiences. If you don't let go of what it is that didn't happen, because oftentimes that is where the struggle is. It's not about what did happen. It's about what didn't happen that gets us locked into our anxiety, that gets us locked into our fear of what comes next. I encourage you, instead of looking at what didn't happen, look at what did. You saw an American robin hopping around and you got to watch their behavior for 20 minutes. You saw a wood thrush. Look at their similarities. Compare them to an American robin. There are so many things that you can do with what you have that does not involve you getting so locked into what it is that was supposed to happen. And I get it. It is so hard. I completely understand. But that doesn't mean you give up. And if you need hope, if you need a reminder of what that looks like, look to my story, listen to the last podcast episode again, because there is always hope. Things always do get better. And what it is that needs to change in order for the experiences you have to get better is to not lean on that what didn't happen anymore. So it means leaning away from the what ifs, while also acknowledging that some birds take some effort to see. So the example that I will give is about my eventual experience with our California quail. So I have a dream of seeing a California quail. And of course, I live in New York City. I'm not going to see a California quail in New York City. That just wouldn't be reasonable. If I went out every day and went to see the birds and expected to see a California quail, I would be sorely mistaken and I would be upset, obviously, because I didn't see a California quail, but also, why would I expect to see a California quail? I am literally in another state. I'm in a completely separate frame of mind. It's not a good time for me to see a California quail because I'm on a different coast. So what do? I tell myself, you know what? I am going to see a California quail. Do I know how I'm going to see a California quail quite yet? No, I absolutely do not. I have no idea. But that doesn't mean that I tell myself I'm not going to see them. I am going to see a California quail by the end of this year. I just don't have the how yet, and I'm completely okay with that. I'm okay with waiting until I have the how, but I know it's coming. And I trust it. But I'm also doing the day-to-day effort to get myself to a point where I will see a California quail. So doing things like reaching out to different brands that are based out of California that can eventually get me there, by working on partnerships so that I have the income and the stable salary that I need to be able to get me to California to see the California quail. These are little steps and little incremental things that I'm doing to get me to my dream of seeing that bird. And so it's not necessarily about putting our hands up and saying, okay, all right, I went out to see a Atlantic puffin, for example, for today, and I didn't end up seeing one, so that's it, case closed, we're done. It's not like that. What it is I went outside to see a California quail. I went outside in hopes of seeing Atlantic puffin. It didn't end up happening. Here's what I did see, though. I saw all of these amazing shorebirds. I saw an American oyster catcher, for example, and I got to just live and experience everything through them. And then I will go home, and if I still want to see an Atlantic puffin after reflecting on all of those amazing, beautiful birds that I saw today, then I will make the plans to go see an Atlantic puffin, because if I want it that badly, I will work that badly to get it. And that is how it works. That is the distinction. That is how birds help us get to a place of longing for more, but not getting it, to desiring more and making plans to make it happen for ourselves. The last point that I will make about our meditative, structural, and sensory section for today is about predictability. And again, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but birds give you the opportunity to really understand just how predictable things can be, even though things are completely unpredictable. If, for example, you are someone who really struggles with routine change, birds really allow us to create and build some predictability around something that might feel very unpredictable. So, for example, when I was traveling to London, I am going to see a completely new set of birds. It is so different. It is admittedly a little bit nerve-wracking because I have to identify all of these birds in an exciting way. Don't get me wrong, this is an amazing problem to have, but it is still a little bit of pressure to be able to identify birds on the fly while I'm in a completely different country. So it's unpredictable. I have no idea what I'm going to see. I've never been to these parks before. Again, it's a completely new environment, but what did I do? I sat down with my bird book and I went through and I read bird after bird after bird after bird that I could potentially see while I was in England. So I took the steps to learn more about the birds that I could see while I was traveling there. But again, you never know what you're going to see. So I could read about 30 different birds and I could end up seeing 10 of them and end up seeing 40 different birds that are not even like those 10 that I saw. So it truly depends on the day. And I have to accept that. I have to accept that I did everything that I possibly could have. I put all of the preparation work in. I sat and I studied and I read and I learned. I did as much as I possibly could to feel as comfortable with identifying the multiple different birds, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I will get it all right. Sometimes I'll miss a bird. Sometimes I won't identify correctly. That's the unpredictability. And if unpredictability scares you, then leaning into what you can do, like reading about the birds, like downloading the Merlin app, like downloading eBird and looking at the birds that you could see in that area, will allow you to ground yourself in some predictability that you need to feel safe, because we all need different levels of predictability, but nothing is going to be predictable all the time. And that is particularly true with birds. It's true with your real life. It's true in all of these different areas. You know, we can feel like something is so predictable, like something is so accountable, like whatever it is that we have in that moment is going to be there forever, but that's just not the case. That's not, unfortunately, how life works. People come and go, opportunities come and go, and so finding the pieces that you can rely on associated with yourself and what you can do is going to be so, so important for your growth, both around birds and in your own personal life. This will really help you lean into who you are. And also you get an opportunity to learn what it is that you actually need. It's not like any of these skills only and solely apply with the birds. They also apply in your personal life. You get to choose what you take away. You get to choose what the birds want to show you. And part of that is so beautiful. It's so beautiful because it's completely up to you. It is one of the only things that I will say, for myself, it is one of the only spaces where I have completely built out a niche for myself based on my own personal traits and my own personal needs. And it's allowed me to expand those into other areas that I literally never thought would be possible. I'm able to advocate for myself in ways that feel unreal. Genuinely. And I'm so grateful that I have been able to come back to birds multiple times throughout my life. If you watched last week's podcast episode, then you know that I've had quite a difficult journey with birds and that they have helped me through all of it. I've been taken through so many different emotions. I've gone from love to necessity to passion, back to necessity again, then to passion, to joy, to embrace, to healing, to all these different emotions, experiences that I've had, and none of them were easy. Each one came with its own new challenge that I was so excited to experience, but it doesn't mean that they were easy for me. And I'm still learning and I'm still growing. And I don't want that to stop. ever. I want to keep growing and keep learning, so I will keep creating on platforms like this and talking about birds and sharing about my experience with birds, because I love doing it with you all, and I so deeply appreciate the community that has been built out here, the love that's been shared, the kindness, every single step along the way. I am so lucky, and I am so grateful for you. I'm grateful for the birds, and yeah. So I encourage you to keep going. I want to hear some of your stories, so put it in the comments. If there is something that I didn't mention today about the sensory experience, about the structured, about the meditative, put it in the comments. I want to know your story. The last thing that I will mention is about traveling through the birds. So I gave a little bit of example with my story about London, but I will say that birds can also teach us how to get curious, how to get uncomfortable with some consistency. So that was what I was referring to earlier. The consistency is the consistency that you give yourself. You create it. So that is something that you can take into your travels, whether it be a new experience or an old one. If you're going back to a place that you've been multiple times, there's so much that you can do and build out from alongside of the birds. Try new things, test, grow. Nothing is solidified, so you can always adjust your approach. You can always adjust what it is that you want to do, even if something feels like it is set in stone. You said you were going to do this, but now you need to switch it up. It's up to you. It is your life, and you get to live it exactly how you want to. And that means living by your own rules. And it's okay if they're different from the rules that everyone else has. Just like the birds. A American robin might have one rule about how they interact when it is territory protection time versus an eastern bluebird who is much more docile and won't necessarily fight for their land in a way that an American robin would. It is up to you. You create your own rules. Be the eastern bluebird if you want to, or be the American robin. Be feisty. Be who it is feels right to you, because being anyone else is not going to be worth it. It's not going to feel good, and it's not going to feel right. So settle in with yourself and do it alongside the birds, because they will help you feel more comfortable, more confident, more energized. Lastly, y'all, the only thing I want to say is I encourage you all to embrace your chirp, chasing, loving selves, because that is where you are going to unlock your true passion, your true joy. I have so many people that come in my lives and tell me that my authenticity and my excitement and love for the birds is so inspiring for them. And I am so grateful that I get to relay that and share that with you all. And I encourage you to embody some of it. You can carry these same sentiments and excitement for the birds with yourself as well. And I am so excited to see, hear, feel all of it. And we're going to share it all together. So this has been another lovely podcast episode. It is so great to come on here with you all. I love you so much, and I hope that you have an amazing rest of your week. I will see you soon. Bye.